Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Olunike Adeliyi, an actor you may have seen in Flashpoint, Workin Moms, and Saw 3D, among dozens of other credits. She was nominated for Canadian Screen Award as Best Supporting Actress for her role in Boost, and she can currently be seen as the warrior Kali in Audrey Cummings' new thriller Darken, which is screening in Toronto, Calgary, Ottawa, St. Catharines, Whitby, and Winnipeg through Friday, July 6th. Olunike chose Boyz N the Hood, the revelatory look at life in South Central Los Angeles from writer-director John Singleton. It introduced audiences to Cuba Gooding Jr., Ice Cube, and Morris Chestnut, expanded the conversation about African-American families, and sadly was shadowed by the real-life violence it tries to stand against. Singleton won newcomer prizes from the New York Film Critics Circle and the Los Angeles Film Critics Association, and was nominated for Oscars for Best Original Screenplay and Best Director. At 24, still the youngest person to be nominated in either of those categories. I should point out as well that we recorded this on a really hot afternoon, which is probably why my brain wasn't quite where it could have been. This is why I keep insisting the movie was released in 1992 instead of 1991, but it gets sharper once I hydrate. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Firsts. And it's like all around. We can move into the discussion of firsts, because even every single actor, like young actor in that movie, was the first time they ever did it. They'd never acted before.
Yeah,
could you imagine? And now they're all hugely famous.
Kind of striking to me that
the only famous people were Angela Bassett and Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah.
That was it. And they're all huge, not just a little bit. They're all huge.
Yeah, so this is 1992 when this film comes out, and Gooding wins the Oscar 4 years later for Jerry Maguire. I mean, Ice Cube's already Ice Cube.
Right.
But he hadn't acted. Yeah. And by that same point, in 96, I think he made at least one of the Friday films, right? Like, this is the launching pad.
Yes, I think this was the beginnings of when he decided that he was going to do Friday. And then Friday blew up for him, and then he just became this movie mogul as well.
And Chestnut, too?
Chestnut's still huge. Yeah. He's still a big star.
But this was his first film?
This was his first film. Same with Nia Long. This was her first film.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he basically just... I mean, I'm old enough that I remember seeing a preview screening a month or two before it opened.
Wow.
Columbia Pictures was really high on it, and they basically invited the press who hadn't seen it at whichever film festival it was at to come and see it. And it
tore my heart out.
It was, well, yeah. So what was your first experience? When did you first see it?
I saw it when I was in high school.
Okay.
When it released in 92. And I was with friends. I remember going to the movie theater with friends. I had never known anything about Black America. Because I'm like Nigerian and Jamaican. So I know that life, I know that world, I know Canadian life, but I don't know anything about what Black America was experiencing. You know, Compton, or South Central, like even like all the ghettos of New York and Philly and all the different states. Clueless.
Right.
So I see this and it just rocked my core to a point where it was traumatizing for me, I thought. Because I was like, why is everybody sitting around and allowing this stuff to happen? This black on black crime like this, you know? And then I love the way Lawrence Fishburne kind of breaks it down to his son and his friend. It's like, you know, there's a reason for it, and it's historic. You know, we've been positioned to be put against each other, to basically grab whatever scraps there is because of the history with slavery and then he explains, why do you think that there's like a liquor store on every corner, you know, or a gun shop, or just these are the reasons why it keeps the community down. And I was like, I think I was, I don't know, like 15, 16, sitting there going. And then the part when we fall in love with the characters so much, and then Ricky dies, it just...
Yeah.
So it was a big deal. It was a big deal. Even to this day, even when they were hanging out on Crenshaw, do you remember that time when they were hanging out on Crenshaw? and they were talking about if God was a bitch, you know, you know, why God gotta be a bitch though? I'm just saying, if God was a bitch, and they go into this whole speech. But I remember when someone said, you know, like, what's up, and then one of the gentlemen that always had the soother in his mouth, he's like, the sun, the moon, and the stars and shit. And I still say that today when everybody says, hey, what's up? The sun, the moon, and the stars and shit. And they're like, where's that from? I'm like, you do know, because it's something that just kind of stayed in the psyche.
Yeah, I mean, to connect with the film, whatever the circumstances, always, I find, like, if you saw something in high school that really touched you, it stays with you forever. There's something
stays
about,
with you forever.
like, you're impressionable, you're a sponge for everything like that. But also to see, I mean, it was revelatory for everybody.
Everyone
at the time. People were talking about Singleton as the next. I mean, the Spike Lee comparison.
He was 19.
Yeah, that's it, right?
He's nominated for an Oscar.
Film school brat, basically, who suddenly does this thing that he had clearly wanted to do since he was, I think, 12 or something. He'd been talking about making movies.
Yeah.
That part of his mythology. And to come out of the gate with this thing, which is gorgeous, like beautiful to look at, stunningly photographed, and also positioned by a major studio for release to be mainstreamed right out of the gate, and also to be dealing with stuff that people did not know how to deal with. Not
At
just
all.
Yeah, I mean, Spike Lee was making Jungle Fever. That's the New York version, but it's so stylized and so, I mean, almost cartoonish in its depiction of an environment, especially after the hyper-realism of Do the Right Thing, that people were already starting to go, I don't know that it feels like he's going over the top. There was a lot of conversation about how it was, you know, like that final shot in Jungle Fever where it spins out with the camera shooting right into Sam Jackson's face. Or, no, it wasn't Sam Jackson's face.
The other gentleman with the... Isn't the other gentleman with the big mustache? I think he passed really recently.
No, that can't be right. I'm thinking of the wrong person. Shoot. This is what happens when I don't prep for everything.
It's okay.
But the big ending with, you know, looking into the camera and screaming, no. This was the antidote. This was the perceived as the real world version from the West Coast, because even though it's, you know, it's more violent, it's more explicitly graphic in its depiction of violence, it still felt real. It played as real.
Oh yeah, and it, you know how real it got, right? Because you know people died.
People shooting each other in theaters, yeah. Although apparently
because you know people are going to the theaters that you belong to different gangs. Everybody wants to see it, so you have the Bloods and the Crips there, and it's like, ooh, yeah. People died. A lot of people died.
Yeah, it was I remember it being kind of played up and then almost immediately played down. There was talk about bringing security guards into theaters here in Toronto, which is always
I remember
kind of adorable and silly. When
I know, but I remember
decides.
that when, because of what was happening in America.
Yeah,
that they were thinking about, like, what about the safety of the people here? Because I mean, we do have Bloods and Crips here in Toronto as well.
But in 1992, we didn't have quite so many guns, though, right?
No,
the odds of being shot at a movie theater were far, far lower, I'm sure, than they are now. But
and they weren't in a lot of theaters here.
Yeah, that's true.
They weren't.
Scaled back the theaters as well.
Yeah.
For fear of violence, which is always so weirdly...
But it's a reality. The thing is, it's like, shouldn't predict that, right? Like, that's not fair. But, I mean, I've been around enough shootings in Toronto in my lifetime to know that it's possible.
Yeah.
You know? It's happened.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's not something that should be taken lightly.
No.
Guns are a big deal, right? And right now we have a huge gun problem in Toronto.
I think it's more, certainly it's more prevalent now. It's romance, right? Like selling the idea of having a gun has always been attractive, and now they're apparently easier and cheaper to get. So I don't know. I mean,
we don't live in America.
Yeah, well then also
where
there's that.
Anything can happen.
Yeah, well, and with Boyz N the Hood too, the idea that the threat of violence followed the film became part of the marketing as well. Like, this was a dangerous film.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a vaguely racist response to that when the media starts buzzing about how the black movie is having all the shootings. But in that case, it was very specific to the subject matter.
Because they had to tell the truth.
Yeah, and there
Right?
are shootings in the film. There is gang violence. That's what the movie's about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And I always imagine. I remember, like, even at the very end of the film, of how excited people were about the violence.
right, that's
Do you remember that?
I do.
That everybody was like screaming and hollering, kind of like the end of Get Out.
Yeah,
It was like, wow,
yeah, and that somehow
That's
that
where we
violence
are.
serves as a catharsis, but it's
because we felt like released of that sadness, that anger from that boy dying.
yeah, but it's so odd, and I think it's intentional in the film, and it's so strange to see a movie that has spent like 100 minutes discussing nonviolence and avoidance and breaking the cycle,
Right.
to then have a character fall into the same
cycle.
exact thing,
Mm-hmm.
but then have it still pay off. I mean, my audience was, they seeded it with kids from, I'm not sure where they were from, but it was a screening room that was generally used for critics, and then it was maybe a 40-seat room,
Mm-hmm.
and a number of high school students were invited for the screening to give us the appropriate atmosphere, I guess.
Wow.
Or maybe because it was a test screening. And they were going crazy for Doughboy just straight up assassinating people. I mean,
Yeah.
that scene where he guns down a wounded man and kills a wounded man.
Yeah, and we all know in that moment, though, that he was going to go eventually.
Oh, sure.
And I like
it's-
the way that they played that.
Yeah.
It's like, he had a lot of remorse, but then, like, eventually you just saw him fade away. Just knew that
Yeah.
that was his time.
It's a quality of Ice Cube's that he doesn't get to do very often, but to just turn himself off, the way he can tamp down his charisma and just go blank.
Mm-hmm.
He makes it great heavy.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Yeah, there was this, and I think the same year he was in Walter Hill's movie Trespass.
Yes, I remember that.
And he was just a straight villain. There was no context, no layering to him.
Yeah.
But he was really good.
He
at
was
it.
like that in, was it Three Kings?
No, not really.
I think
He's
so.
Not the
Like
bad guy in Three
he's not
Kings.
the bad guy, but he was dialed down a lot from the Ice
Yeah.
Cube we know. We just see him as a soldier.
That's true. He sort of has equal footing with Clooney and
With
Spike
Clooney,
Jonze.
yeah.
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 Oh, that's a good movie too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's always been a better actor than people give him credit for, and I think it's because once he started doing comedies, it's perceived as an
It
easier
went
muscle,
to a whole
right?
other way. Yeah, the
Yeah.
whole Are We There
Yeah,
Yet?
I was gonna say,
like, oh god,
the Friday movies.
We're like, what
he's
happened?
great,
And then he
and
turned into this other stereotype of he's just the angry guy in these stereotypical movies, these comedies,
Yeah, the
It's
early,
like,
it's like
it's
cuddly
the
family
angry guy
man.
again. But his son is doing well too.
Yeah, he's in.
Yeah.
What did I just see him in? Den of Thieves, I think he's in that with Gerard Butler. And
Oh,
he's,
nice.
Yeah, he's got
He
a
did
pretty
a
good
really
part.
good job playing his dad. It could have gone left.
Yeah,
Right.
when you heard about the
Because
casting, it's just
you're born into money. You're born into money.
sure.
It's really hard. Like, you're born into money, but who else can play
Yeah.
Ice Cube but
I wonder
him?
if it's just something that you can get your parents' attitude without ever knowing how they live. Playing your own parent is a weird.
It's a weird dynamic.
Yeah.
Because, like, my mom is very subdued. She's very quiet. Everything is a little soft giggle. And her side of the family was always wondering where I got this, like, loud, rambunctious, way about me. I'm just energetic and I just like to have fun. And I was wondering too, but my dad is like that. Maybe that's it. But when I finally went to Nigeria, I went, oh, well, here I am.
Okay.
Everyone's expressive and fun and big like that. And so for a long time, I thought I was like the black sheep and I was just maybe uncouth and, it's crazy. And that's why I became an artist. But then I was outdid. Oh, yeah. Nigeria, I mean, they were expressive. It was beautiful to watch how big they were. Unapologetic. I mean, unapologetically. Just big. And like just kings and queens. And I was just like, well, there's why I do that. I'm never apologizing for being me again.
So is
Yeah.
it just a question of scale? Like performance is part of the personality?
Yeah, I think it's in me. It's ancestral. It's ancestral. It's not just me. It's definitely inherited.
Okay.
Yeah. And so no matter what I do, I don't apologize for it because I bring the ancestors with me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So as far as, I'm just veering back into to Boyz N the Hood, and its depiction of family, people are away a lot. People are working, people are out of the home, people are busy. And this, I don't think we'd really seen that before either. When Nelson George did the show a couple of years ago, he picked Sparkle, the first film, the 76 version, and said that it was, it was sold as a blaxploitation movie at the time, and he went to see it with his friends in Times Square, and they just saw a family in a kitchen making dinner, and they'd never seen that sort of representation of their own lives, of how a family would be in a movie before, because all those dinner table scenes had been white people before. Boyz N the Hood has, it arrives at a point where people have been making movies with black casts, and that's not a new thing, but the way that it kind of unpacks family relationships in South Central, and specifically how absent parents contribute to the problem, the appeal of gangs. I think that was new. I mean, I
don't know if it was new in film.
Yeah, it had been,
but it was universal.
Yeah.
I'm used to that. Like, my mom is a nurse. She was always at work, But I'm lucky to be born in Canada, and in the suburbs, so I couldn't get into too much, stupid little fun, but like not where it would cost me my life, right? And I didn't grow up with my father, so as I came from a single parent home, like my father and I, more in my late teens, is that we kind of reestablished a relationship, but that's why I related to that film, because I understood it was always like, get to your books, but there was not always the parent that was always there to make sure that happened.
Right.
Because they have to go to work. They do. And my mom's job was so demanding, of course. That is something new that was in film, but it was kind of exposing what has been happening in black families for a long time, and it dates back to so much history. Black mothers have been single. A lot of kids come from single parent homes of black moms.
Sure.
and that mom would have a few kids sometimes. I mean, in Boyz N the Hood was one, but they showed you different families, of course. But yeah, that has been a constant for centuries, because of the separation of the mother and father, coming out of being sold through slavery, and so that just it continued throughout history. And so right now, the modern day is like the single black mom. She's doing the best she can, and her doing the best she can, she still could end up with dead children.
Yeah, that's something that's coming around a lot lately. I mean, obviously it is, right? Because thanks to social media and the prevalence of camera phones, like we're past the point where you can sort of wave off the idea that
it doesn't. It's not
that
happening.
Police treat black people and white people the same.
Yeah, no.
It's just and it's awful. And it happens in Canada too. I mean, without a doubt. And the idea that you can do everything right and still end up in that situation.
And the
idea that you
that
need
was
to
remember when that was in Boyz N the Hood?
Yeah.
When Trey got pulled over?
Yeah.
He didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, I think that was...
And that was a black cop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the internalized... That's the Los Angeles experience, right? I'm trying to figure out if I've told this story on the podcast before. My first trip to Los Angeles was in the summer of 1992. And I was there to cover a home video launch of some John Cassavetes films at the AFI, and I was staying at a hotel in Sunset, and I figured out that I could walk it because I'd never been to Los Angeles before. I might as well walk along Sunset because it's only a mile and it's beautiful out. And I got pulled over because I don't know, I had an iced tea in my hand or something. I have no idea why, but a police car pulled me over on Sunset Boulevard and just said, "Do you need help?"
Wow. He asked you if you needed help.
Yeah, specifically.
Not where are you going? Can I see? Right.
And the context of that stop was really... It wasn't until later that I thought, that was the weird thing to ask. Yeah. Because I'm walking east. I wasn't injured. I was dressed appropriately. I wasn't doing anything wrong. But also I was perceived to be and it turns out it's just because nobody walks in LA. And it was weird. Right. Apparently.
No one does.
But
no.
Yeah.
Unless you're on Hollywood Boulevard. Which is
and that's a different purpose. You're walking with a reason.
Yeah. And I've had my situation in LA, because when I was living there, and it's probably the reason why I was like, I'm out, I'm done here, because it's not fun hearing those, we call them ghetto birds, the helicopters.
Oh, yeah.
It's constant. That's the sound of LA, you know. But I remember coming home from the movies with some friends, and but I was riding with a white gentleman in the car, and so the police was making a left turn at the lights, and I went through the lights, but they changed their mind and came and pulled me over, and I was like, okay, cool. Tapped on my window with their gun.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And I was like, what the? They're like, roll down the window, let's, your license and registration. I was like, okay, here you go. And I was thinking, well, couldn't possibly know why they would. And my hair was really low then too. So I also looked like a black gentleman. I could have been passing because my hair's so low.
Okay.
Right. When the officer came back and the other one was standing on the other side, she's like, how do you guys know each other? We're like, we're Canadian. We came here. We're Canadians.
Yeah.
We're visiting, you know? They're like, okay, well, do you know that this car has a warrant? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why would it have a warrant? It's a rental car.
Yeah.
Really? And he's like, well, you need to have it checked out, you know, because there's a warrant on the car. And I was like, officer, if there was a warrant on the car, you would have had me out of the car already.
Yeah, so what was this? I mean,
They just said, as you were go. They just pulled me over because I was black.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, they would have taken the car.
You would think.
They would have taken the car if it had a warrant.
Yeah, so it's just part of this casual intimidation. Right, of course it is.
And I was like, so here I am, a regular person, not in any kind of weird, groupings or gangs or any affiliation with the underworld in any way.
Right.
And I could easily lose my life. Like, he's tapping on the window with a gun, so that could have gone off.
Yeah, no, that's just bad form.
Like, why?
Incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, so I was like, you know what? No, I'm not interested, because I'm a mom. And I needed to make sure that my life was preserved for her. Like, I can't do this to her. I can't be in America to do what? To chase what? I was like, no, I can have my career in Canada. It wasn't interesting to me.
God, that's horrible. But that's
horrible.
Yeah, and obviously that's the milieu of Boyz N the Hood. That's the world that they're showing us in this sort of hyper-intensified way.
Yes.
But I know I can't understand. I cannot comprehend being raised that way, learning how to make sure you don't do, like the whole make sure they always see your hands, make sure that you don't do anything that gives the police an excuse. I don't trust police officers, but I'm not afraid of them in the same way that these characters are in the film.
And I grew up
and that people are raised to
being taught not to trust them.
Yeah.
Like, to be careful. If you need to ask any questions, you need help, find a woman, you know.
A woman police officer specifically?
Just
or just a woman? Okay.
Not police officers at all, because you don't know what could happen.
Yeah.
Because I've had friends that had traumatic situations when they were just like 14 and 15 and just pulled over and being called the N-word or monkey or all of that. And,
I mean, I know it happens,
it's like,
but it's still
happens
sickening.
in Canada.
We have the illusion in Canada that we're better, but we're really not.
No, but we are a little better. But we're not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, like, it could be worse.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, with watching Boyz N the Hood, being a teenager like that, like, I hadn't been exposed yet.
Right.
I hadn't been exposed because I'm living in La La Land, with, a pretty great household. Academics as a family members are all academics. So, I just grew up a particular way. Even in Jamaica, when I grew up with my grandparents, it was like all academics. I was raised on the farm. And so this just rocked my world. And because of that movie is why I just fantasized even more of wanting to be a performer. I was like that. Like, to be able to affect somebody like that. And over again, the blow was never softened the more times I watched the film.
Did you see it theatrically more than once? Did you get the chance?
I did. I think I went to the theater 8 times.
Wow.
Yeah, 8 times. And then I ended up owning it, and yeah, I watch it all the time. I think it's got to be over 50 times. It's just like Coming to America. It's got to be way over 50 times.
Yeah.
Like, because I can recite the dialogue. So yeah, those are two impactful movies in my life.
And Coming to America is so completely opposed in its worldview. Like it's sunnier and looser, and it's almost got like this sort of Borscht Belt shtick going on, and the broadness of the performances.
Yeah.
But someone did point out not too long ago, because it's its 30th anniversary this year, that it presents the comparison was to Black Panther. Like that Black Panther is the first movie in 30 years to imagine.
Could you imagine?
A fictional African kingdom.
Everywhere it was Wakanda versus Zamunda.
Yeah.
How are you going to dress up to go to the theater to see Black Panther?
Yeah, and people were representing Zamunda, which is just such a weird position to take, that they're almost having this war between the two fictional kingdoms.
Yeah.
But it's a good-natured, sort of adorable war, because one is technologically advanced and the other one is just sort of a peaceful, happy... resplendent is the wrong word. I'm just thinking like just they have diamonds. They're mineral rich. One is mystical and the other
one's like satire.
Yeah, exactly. It's just invented to be silly, but also.
And the other one based off of like real facts, real facts. Like the Dora Milaje, right?
Yeah.
The Dora Milaje is a part of based on this group called the Dahomey. Right, when the Dahomey clan or the army they were in position to protect the king of Benin in the 1600s.
Okay. I knew there was a historical precedent, but I didn't know.
Yeah, so it's like they've taken from history and created this wonderful film.
I was really happy. I haven't had the chance to talk about the film on the podcast yet, but I was amazed to see that the movie leans into the thing that the comics could never really address, which is that an African nation remaining removed during slavery, while Europeans and Americans are coming and taking Africans from other countries, and the responsibility of Wakanda, it's Killmonger's whole his whole perspective is shaped because he's witnessed the results from the other side.
Results from it. Yeah.
What happens when you don't intervene is that people get hurt, people die, people are taken away, families are destroyed, and
Ethiopia did that. They weren't colonized.
Because they avoided...
Because they also were smart enough to pit the British and the Italians against each other.
I didn't know any of this.
Yeah. So that they would try and fend off for that land not to be colonized. Ultimately, the Brits were like allies with Ethiopia, and Italy was always trying to colonize it, but the Brits had more power. But that was Ethiopia's way of playing the two sides.
Yeah, how has there not been a movie made about that yet? That sounds like a great story.
Yeah.
But
it reminded me of Wakanda.
Sure.
Wakanda does have its allies, right? And there are reasons sometimes you have to in order for your land not to be overthrown by colonizers. Yeah.
Yeah, and in a superhero movie to see that level of history engaged with
the depth, right?
Yeah, and of course you have the out because it's not really our world. You can give yourself a little artistic remove and play with the stories. But then Ryan Coogler's a smart guy. Of course,
smart. He's so smart for him to started out of Oakland too, where he's from.
Yeah, I talked to him when Fruitvale Station came out, and I would never have guessed he'd end up where he has ended up, just because he didn't sound like he wanted to do studio stuff. He just wanted to make dramas.
Right.
And then 2 years later, Creed, and then Black Panther. It's just like, you're good at this.
It's studio, but it's drama.
He's making his own thing. Yeah, he's doing his... Creed and Black Panther are basically identical in that they are films that take a property and show you something that you never thought could be part of that property.
Right.
And they're told beautifully, and they're strong narratives and great performances, and they're the best version of what they could be. But Fruitvale Station is so small and focused.
That one was like a Boyz N the Hood for me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
When was that?
I had that same feeling. That same reaction, that same feeling. And I've seen many films of, black on black crime or all kinds of different things, right? Police brutality. There's so many.
Sure.
Menace to Society. There's so many. But there is something about Michael B. Jordan that is so beloved. And he does such a great job in that character that, they developed the family story so well that when that happened, everything dropped. Everything just fell out beneath us.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with myself. I sat in the theater after it was finished for about half an hour just crying.
Oh, wow.
That was hard.
It's hard.
Because we knew the story. I knew the story. I'd already seen it in the news.
Right, so you knew where it was going.
So I knew where it was going, and so it was that eerie feeling constantly going, "Ooh, when is this going to happen?"
Yeah.
And when you knew it was about to, it was awful.
Yeah.
It was awful, but what a great film.
Yeah. I had been in San Francisco, I think, 24 hours before I saw the film. It just happened that way. They screened it the day I got back from a junket there. Mm-hmm. And it was just eerie to realize that, like, I had been on the BART and I had seen all this stuff. And, you can't... San Francisco in the summer is just a city of tensions because the homeless problem there is worse. I think it's probably the worst in America.
Wow.
During the summer, for some reason.
Worse than Washington.
Maybe. I mean, they both have the same... I've never been to Washington in the height of summer, so just the sense of despair and emptiness and the fact that there are so many people just not going anywhere, not doing anything. You really... It's a systemic thing that is the result of government neglect, which is the thing that brings me back to Boyz N the Hood again, because South Central has become a war zone because of police. In 92 anyway, it had become this place where the police only went if they were prepared to kill someone. There were no service calls. There was no sense that the community was a community. It was perceived as gangland, and no one went there. And Singleton making a movie about the people who live in the middle of it and are not fully fledged anythings.
And he's one of them. Because Trey is him.
Yeah, that's what
he just told the story.
So if you stick to the personal, it becomes universal, it becomes relatable, and that's his way in.
That was his way in.
But the result is a film that now, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out, is the last reel over the top because of the violence? Does it feel like it's designed to pay off, right? Like it's a huge emotional... Boyz N the Hood.
Boyz N the Hood.
Huge emotional catharsis.
Yeah.
We are rooting for Doughboy once he abandons the illusion of being a
gangster.
Yeah, well, he embraces it. He leans into... I guess the illusion is pacifism. Like he was never going to be... He seethes through the entire film. He's always about to go off. And if the movie
But when he kills, though...
Yeah.
He's like, what is this all even for?
Yeah, it's not a good thing when it happens. If the movie is a struggle for his soul, he loses. But if it's a struggle for Trey's soul,
he wins.
He comes out the other side, right? He seems to... He's...
Because he understood when Trey got out of the car.
Yeah, his revelation.
He didn't even get down on him for that.
Yeah, and if that's Singleton, then his way out was making the movie.
Yeah.
Right, so...
That's a good one.
That's his thing. And it turns this film where a lot of people die unnecessarily because of this arc of revenge that's going on back and forth between the gangs. It puts the movie on a footing where you can see it as a triumph, as a happy ending for the guy who made it. And it's a brilliant piece of marketing, but it also happens to be true.
Right.
That Singleton built a career out of not wanting to be Trey, or not wanting to be Doughboy more specifically, and seeing what that is and getting away.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. You can explain that better.
Yeah, it's this weird inspirational story.
And I like how he started that as a kid, because he's always questioning things, right? He's always questioning things, and you could see that he could have gone one way or the other from he was in the classroom he was, right? And arguing about where we actually come from. It starts out with, my dad says we come from Africa, and they're like, I ain't no booty scratcher, and he's arguing with the other kids because he's trying to find his footing of his history, his lineage. It's a coming of age story for him, and so to constantly be questioning, like, if we came from this history, this empowered history. Like, why are we living in this right now? Why are we living in this garbage, this community where we're killing each other? So I like how it started out that way. And it continued, and thank God he got out. Well, of course, we saw the results also with Singleton. He got out. But a lot of people don't make it.
Yeah.
And he was lucky to have both his parents, not together, but he still had very powerful parents, very strong, very intelligent parents. that would whoop his butt, and there was a fear that he had of them, to not disappoint them. But not everybody has that.
Yeah.
Father and mother, they're both needed.
Yeah, and the home situations for the kids in the film are kind of left a little... they're sort of broad strokes. You don't really get to spend a lot of time at Doughboy's house and
I know.
see where he's from.
And there's a reason for
But yeah, exactly. He doesn't he doesn't want to be there either.
He doesn't want to be there. It's not a loving home for him. For his brother, but not for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm impressed at the economy of storytelling. We're working on a very small budget. He managed to give you, through the script more than anything else, he manages to give us a sense of the other characters' lives, even if we don't spend a lot of time with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all just about what you've been doing and where you've been, and casual dialogue exchanges where there doesn't seem to be very much besides the friendship, right? The three core characters are their own world. They're each other's support system. Mm-hmm. And when that fractures, everything goes to hell.
Wow. It's just so... so it's like, and there's so many layers.
Yeah, it's good structure. Like he's a good writer.
Yeah. I haven't taken in Snowfall yet.
No. No, that's the FX series, right?
Yeah, I haven't taken it in. I had met with him to see if I was possibly going to be part of the show. But it didn't go our way, but
Did you get to talk about...
Of course we did.
So this is the closest I can come to.
I'm friends with his youngest daughter's mother. She lives here.
Okay.
So whenever he's here, we do all get together.
Oh, nice.
And it's fun to discuss this because, here's a man sitting in front of me that affected my life in such a tremendous way, artistically, politically,
Mm-hmm. And you have to relate to him like a person instead of a mentor or... I've had the opportunity to meet people who've impacted my life in the same way, artists who just literally change the way I see the world, and it's always incredibly intimidating to just remember they're also people.
Right.
So how does that...
Well, that feeling, that fandom feeling, it was at the very beginning, I would say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and then now it's John.
Now it's okay.
It's John. Now I've gotten used to him, but it's still daunting. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the person that made my favorite film in the entire world, that changed my whole perspective on life and how I see myself and what I want to do and how I want to tell stories and what more I want to find out about the world and history. So it's just still a very high level of respect.
Yeah.
But I'm so grown now too. I'm a woman. I'm a mother. I've lived. So there's no reason to fan out.
The high school thing always. Like a friend of mine told me once that there's a 15 rule. If you meet someone who is famous before you were 15, before you had a sense of yourself, it'll be harder to relate to them, no matter how old you are when you meet them.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So
I totally agree.
When you do talk about the film, when it comes up, how does he regard it now at this point?
Oh, he's still extremely proud. Yeah. It's his flagship, right?
And 26 years later.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
But how difficult it was to make the film. Not just because of the subject matter, but of how hard it was to get the film made with him being the director. They wanted to put another director in. And, he had to fight for that. Like, no one else can tell my story.
It's literally his own life. It's just so... Yeah. I get it. He was young. The studio gets nervous about anything these days. These days, back then. But, yeah, who else could possibly tell that story?
Only somebody from the hood.
Yeah.
Right. So... It just had to take a chance and let him do that. But it's hard, because, names and the studios want to make sure money comes back. And when you have to fight that politics, it's a slippery slope. Yeah. I had to fight that politics way too many times. And I let go because I'm trying to have fun. I don't want to actually have to hate this industry. So I just It's much easier for me, though, in the actress, mostly being in an actress chair as opposed to a director chair, right? Or a writer's chair, right?
But if it's something you want to do.
Yeah. If something I want to do, I'll just try and figure out a way to do it myself. Yeah. I don't want to knock out anybody.
Sometimes it's necessary.
Boy. I mean, Tupac and John Singleton came to blows a lot.
Really?
Physical fights.
I didn't know that.
Yes. A lot.
I think
they were friends, but they were still always fighting.
Yeah. Well, when you brought up Coming to America before today, you'd mentioned the list of things, and I went and read up on my trivia, and it's like, oh, that's right. Yeah, Eddie Murphy and John Landis came to blows on Coming to America, too.
Of course.
Like these weird tempestuous relationships that happened. But to be in a fist fight with Tupac, I think, is probably an honor at this point.
Probably.
It's a story
at this point, yeah.
It's a story you can dine out on.
Yeah. At this point. He was supposed to. I remember they had a big fight when Tupac was supposed to be the person who led Higher Learning. Remember that movie?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but Omar Epps, yeah, he's the one who did it.
Yeah, and Tupac did Poetic Justice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it was supposed to be Tupac and Higher Learning. I mean, anything Tupac did, notice in that very short time, was epic.
Yeah. I mean,
Poetic Justice, Gridlock.
Yeah, nobody remembers Gridlock now, and it was so good.
Right, like, everything he did, whether he was playing a love interest of somebody or playing a gangster, he was amazing.
Yeah, he had amazing presence. He could just be charismatic sitting still. Yeah, there was this whole... I mean, I don't even know how to describe it, but that second wave of black cinema in the early 90s. New Jack City, kind of being at the outlier of it, where it was still a genre film and it was sort of overplayed, but it caught on anyway.
Because that was the 80s, right?
Yeah, it was like 90, 91.
Height of the crack
it was,
epidemic.
Yeah, it was later than it's always later than I think it was.
Right.
But it was the one that introduced, like, that was the real...
Chris Rock.
Yeah, that's right. Who still makes fun of that scene
Pookie.
now. But that was like one of Wesley Snipes' first big roles, right? Like he that was his Scarface.
Jungle Fever, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, of course it was Snipes in Jungle Fever.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Yeah,
it's him at the end with the zoom in.
Absolutely.
Good. So we brought that back around, so I feel like a complete idiot. But yeah, we're sort of coming up to it now anyway. But the final question of the podcast is always the same, which is, what, if anything, from Boyz N the Hood have you borrowed or stolen or absorbed into your own creative DNA?
That's a great question.
Well,
what have I absorbed into my DNA? That I can't ignore anything that's happening. I can't walk in this world and pretend that brutality is not a part of my existence now. Even living in Canada every day. It's made me just very aware. So since then, it's like I've done a lot of traveling around the world to a lot of developing countries. Mm-hmm. And to me, I see a Boyz N the Hood everywhere. So what that did was wake me up.
Okay.
So I can't be asleep anymore. And so now with the awareness, I try to apply myself in some way with help, through charity work or, because I have an organization that I belong to that we go to Haiti every year called Third World Awareness. And we go to the poorest ghetto in the Western Hemisphere called Cité Soleil. And it is nuts. People don't even move in there. You die there. It's nuts. And we're the only group in the entire world that can go into that place. Yeah. No other charity can go in there. And we're protected by the gangs.
And it's an outreach.
Yes.
What is it that you guys do?
We there's a school that we work with there. So we help to develop a lot of, we built the school, and then we pay for the children to go to school and the teachers, and we develop a lot of the programs, especially when it comes to art, and a lot of the sports programs, and we feed a lot of the community. We've now started this whole outreach where we feed 1,000. We fed 1,000 last year, and it's about 1,500, almost 2,000. But what happens is that they don't eat all the food on their plate. They always share. So that 1,000 turns into like 3,000 people that would be fed, because Haitians don't eat all the food on the plate. They always leave a little bit for somebody else to eat. It's beautiful. So this film led me to the awareness of what's happening globally that I can't ignore anymore. And I have to find some way to be a part of it. Some way to be a part of lessening, ending the violence in some way by letting somebody just eat for that day.
That's great. I mean, it's great that you can do that there's a way.
Right. And I think everyone can if you really want to. If you really want to. You know, it's just little by little. But yeah, that I think I took that away from the community. It's like unless we help each other, who's gonna help us?
Yeah.
Right.
Have you told Singleton this? I mean,
yeah, we have these conversations on a regular.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure he'd love to know he inspired you.
Yes, absolutely, and that's what like our first times meeting. Like, that's all that we would talk about, and then so now it's just branching out into everyday conversation, because now we're getting to know each other more and more, and I tease him all the time, like, when are you gonna write that project for me? Yeah. Like, and he's always laughing, and I'm like, I'm not even joking.
Yeah, you should be laughing.
I'm not even joking. Like, when are we working together? I'm on it. I'm ready. And so I think eventually it'll happen. It always takes the right project to come along. Yeah. But I am definitely infected by his genius.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it when people bring a film onto the show that they can not something that they simply enjoy, but that means something to them, that's really changed them. It's always nice.
It's always nice. But I mean, it's the reason why I do this. Yeah. There's no. If it was just like oh yeah, I'm gonna get big money here and there, I probably would be hugely rich a long time ago. But I remember seeing an interview with Denzel Washington a long time ago, because that's like my idol, right? And when I met him, he's the one who kind of put me on the path of what schools to like apply to. Oh, yeah. Like he literally took me under his wing while he was here shooting John Q. Oh, yeah. And so he put me in that place. I was like, oh, I want to do this thing, but I don't know how. And so he's like, did you ever look at schools in New York? Because you get to live in New York, and you get a chance to grow up there, and while you're learning your craft. And I was like, how am I going to do that with a child? Like, I'm a young mother. And he's like, oh, you figure it out. And it did. It happened. So, like, to come back to watching these people still, that they've affected your life so much. He said, however you start your career and the roles you choose will follow you. And so that's what I've tried to do as much as possible for my whole career. It's like I'm willing to go, yeah, no. Like, oh, they're paying us, I don't care. That doesn't represent who I am. Yeah. Yeah. It's
a good operating system. It's a good base to start from.
Absolutely. And with Darken, I saw that and I was like, okay, there's some nice grit. There's some stuff that I can work with. And I got to build her. Like, I gave her an accent, my father's, I'm like Nigerian, so I gave her an African accent. And when I came in, the director, Audrey Cummings, she was just like, what? And I was the first person. And so I felt sorry for everybody else came after me, because I was ready. I even had makeshift weapons, and I was this warrior. But like, I got to build her and her animal, and what animal that she would work with. And I brought that onto set all the time. And then it just worked. And Audrey just gave me whatever I needed to play. Yeah. And it's just that preparation for films like this, people like Denzel, to watch their work. That's the path that I chose, no matter how long it takes. Yeah. I just came back from watching him yesterday, because that's where I went. I went to New York to see The Iceman Cometh.
Oh, how is it?
Incredible.
Okay.
4 hours.
I know. I kind of figured it would be good, but...
And I'm right here. Like, he's right there. And I'm right here just being spit on. And me and my friend were like, yes, yep, that's Denzel right there. This is it. This is the best acting class. Rather than pay that big money to go to acting classes, to spend hours with somebody telling you, this is what you need to do to make it. Why not just pay that money, sit right front row center, and watch your favorite actor do their thing?
And spit on you.
And spit on you.
In the best possible sense.
I mean, because there's so much going through their veins. I do that with Mark Rylance. I do that with Viola. I just hop over to New York and I just go and just watch and learn.
Yeah.
It's so awesome.
Best acting school is to, as I understand it, is to connect with the energy, right? Mm-hmm. Even if you're not in the scene yourself. So
right.
Of course.
Watching artists. And there's so much to do in the city. Toronto's so great for that. So I get to go to the National Ballet all the time. I'm always going there. I'm always seeing opera. I'm always going to Corner Hall because they've got an amazing sound system and they've got like beautiful bands in there. So it's always important for the artist to feed their artistic soul. And it also lessens a lot of the ego. Because when you watch other people in their element, it makes you know you got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Got a lot of work to do.
My thanks to Olunike Adeliyi, who you can see in Darken playing in theaters across Canada right now. You should also check out her Canadian Screen Award nominated performance in Darren Curtis's Boost. That's available on demand and on iTunes. You can follow Olunike on Twitter at Olunike, just Olunike, and you can find Boyz N the Hood on Blu-ray and DVD from Sony Pictures Home Entertainment. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. The Criterion Laserdisc is slightly harder to find. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you feel like leaving a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever, that would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps, it truly does. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.
I'm afraid you're just too darn loud.